Like I always felt once I sold and I knew I was going to step back someday, my number one job was to get the next guy ready.
I used to do that myself. That we can't find anybody. We want to replicate ourselves out there in the truck. I finally realized one day it wasn't the kids' fault. It was my fault. I was at fault for not creating the system and process to make them successful. But I want to make sure everybody else's family that helped me and my family get to where we are, I want to make sure they're good. I took on a burden when I started hiring people. It wasn't just me and my family anymore that I was looking out for, it was them and theirs also. And so, I've been blessed because of that. I mean, I've watched people buy their first homes, I've watched people have children, I've watched people have grandchildren.
Welcome to the $100 million Mindset, the source for business owners who aspire to scale, grow, and reach their full potential. Whether you're aiming for 5 million, 10 million, or 100 million. Your hosts are Alan O'Neill, the Irish plumber, who scaled Abacus Plumbing and Cooling to over 100 million, and Twiddlywinks Todd Liles, a coach to high-performing business leaders and the owner of Service Excellence, are going to help you think bigger, act smarter, and take your business to the next level.
Everybody, I want to welcome Joe Strittmatter to our show today. Now, the reason why we have Joe on here on the $100 million mindset isn't because he built a $100 million business, because he didn't. But what he did do, and he did very well, was build a $12.5 million business before he sold in 21. And he did this with netting over 20% of profitability. This is a number that very few people hit. And I happen to know this very, very closely because Joe was a client of Service Excellence, and we were there with him and helping him in those early years. And he was always a guy that took what we talked about and executed. So, Alan, I'm happy that you're here and that you get to meet my friend Joe Strittmatter.
Yeah, and if you're trying to grow profitably, stay lean, and dominate your market without becoming a bloated circus, this one's for you. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
You said one time, Joe, I didn't even have gas money. I used my parents' printer to send letters to builders when you were starting. So Joe started with nothing, no service department, no marketing budget, and a business that had to effectively shut down. He rebuilt by sheer hustle, from printing builder letters on borrowed printers to grinding through new construction. Joe clawed his way forward. Then came 2009 and the pivot that changed everything.
So, Joe, let's go back. Take us all the way back to what the company looked like in the 2009 area when you took it over and you officially stepped in. Paint us a picture.
So I want to say it was '05 or '06 is when I actually took over. Um, Dad had shut the company down. It was actually named Nelson's. In 1980, he had bought out a man named Les Nelson out of Louisville and ran it. And he was just burned out. One trucker, he would get up to two or three and then fall back and the deadly pitfalls that most people do. Back then there were not any best practices organizations. There was an RSES chapter locally, and those guys would meet once a week for dinner and talk shop during the off season. But they didn't know how to grow a business. There wasn't a lot of sophistication in the industry at that time, and so you know, out of high school, Dad asked me if I was going to take it over, and I said, "Who the heck wants to be an AC guy?" I wanted to go play ball and do all the things that school was teaching me I needed to do, and realized real quick that school, first of all, wasn't for me, especially college, and bounced around and came back to Dad and said, "Hey, let's do this." And he's like, "Well, you had your chance. Now you got to prove it to me that you want it. I'd given it to you and you turned it down. Now prove it to me." And so, growing up as a little rugrat kid that ran around and annoyed all those guys in those RSES meetings, I went and started talking to those guys and got on with some of them. And worked there for, for each one for a little bit, because back then that was best practices, right? You just jump from group to group or company to company to see what they are doing, to see what they are doing better than the next guy. And that's kind of how you learned. And, did that till about '05, '06. And that's when Dad said, well, here's my license. Good luck. And my wife and I mean, the only thing that we had going for us was we lived in my grandfather's old house for free. And we were literally at one point eating off of a gas card. There was a local Phillips 66 that had like a little restaurant in it, and that's where we would go get food to eat. And from there, I had to hustle. I had to figure out how to eat, essentially. And I reverted back to, growing up with Dad, and all through school, I would go do new homes for him. So I knew how to do new construction. And so the internet was really starting to become a thing in that '05 era. And so I figured out what Google was and started researching home builders. And I didn't even know how to use Excel, so I had them all written down on a tablet, and names, addresses, and all that. And, I figured if I could beat everybody else's price, then I would get the work. And so I didn't have a printer. So Mom and Dad had a printer at their house. They were highfalutin and had a printer. And so I would drive a mile down the road, or sometimes even ride my bike over there, and print off these letters and steal stamps from Mom and Dad and send them out. And, it took about 3 months. I got my first builder. 3 more months, I got my second builder. And then it kind of started to snowball from there until '09. I had got up to, originally I was doing all the installs myself. I had to make as much money as I could. And then once I started getting more builders and jobs were piling up, I found subcontractors. And then I backed out of doing the rough ends and started doing all the finals. And so I got to the point I had 5 crews coming in each day to do 1 or 2 new systems. And then '09 hits. Before then, before all this happened, I worked for one of my dad's buddies who owned a chain of supply houses, who he later sold out to Watsco. And, I knew that I was missing something on the service side. And so when '09 hit, there was a knee-jerk reaction, and I joined a franchise. I won't say the name, but your Chris Elmore was the vice president of it. And so I was in there 6 months and sold it to another territory person, and reverted back to construction, and trimmed down. I went from 2.5 million in revenue down to 458,000. And at that, me doing the work, I could net 100 grand a year. So I was doing okay. I wasn't doing well, but I was doing okay. And I remember walking through this new construction home and got a phone call from a TM, and I answered it, and they asked me how that franchise was going. And I said, hey, I'm out of it. And they said, well, you know where all that information comes from, don't you, that they use to build these franchises? No, tell me. He said, there's a man named Ron Smith, and Ron wrote a book called HVAC Spells Wealth. You need to get that book. So I go home, not much of a reader, so I get the CD. What really, what's the word I'm looking for? Blew my mind. I received the CDs, and there was missing something, some paperwork or something that goes with it. So I'll call up where I ordered the CDs through, and Ron Smith answered. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, are you like really the real Ron Smith? And he's like, yeah. I'm the real Ron Smith. And I was like, what are you doing answering the phone? And he said, well, the girls are gone to lunch and the phone is ringing, so I figured somebody needed to answer it. So I sat there for about 30 minutes bending his ear, and the rest is history. That led me on the path that, I'm still on today.
Alan, did you ever meet Ron?
I met him and I think actually it was a Service Nation or Service Roundtable event one
Yeah.
time. Yeah, yeah.
So I had a chance to hang out with Ron a couple times, and he was older by this point. But the first couple times I met him, he was still 100% all there. Had a very similar experience to Joe. It's like, what are you doing? Answering the phone, sort of a thing. Um, but what I can remember, Joe, about going through and reading the book, and I think I read it near the beginning of me starting Service Excellence. So I'd already been through Clockwork, and I was a member of Nexstar and all these organizations, and there are all these core things that I can remember that we were teaching at Clockwork and were being taught at Nexstar. And I open up the book and I'm reading through his words. I'm going, "Oh, get and keep a customer." That's word for word Ron Smith. It's like this guy's been doing this since 1964. Why? It's like Frank Blau. It's like you say that name when you talk about certain levels of success, and it blew me away that no one in those other organizations that I was aware of were bragging on Ron Smith. And he's passed away now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Joe, I had the same experience with Ron going out to the events, and he'll sit down, and I think we had an hour after dinner one day. Man, the guy is just wonderful. And I think he was living in Franklin, Tennessee, if I recall at the time. So,
Uh, yeah, I think yes, then, but I think they later moved to northern Georgia.
oh, did they?
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty fascinating. I'm not even sure where we're at this point in terms of the notes,
Yeah.
Alan.
I think we moved to scaling profit, not chaos. Todd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you kind of helped us through there. So let's go to a statement that you said. You said, "I only know three people who ran a higher net than we did, and they're legends." So we're going to jump into your ability to run a very profitable business. And if we look at things, here's how I see things, right? We've talked to a lot of people here now on the show that have businesses that are over 100 million. And it's really easy to go, wow, over 100 million, lots of complications there. But I actually think there's a lot more opportunity to do what you've done. Built a $10 to $15 million business and be extraordinarily profitable. So that's why we have you on the show, because I want you to just lay down some of the practical things here. So here's my first question for you. Why did you stay focused on net profit? We all know that revenue is vanity and profit is sanity, but a lot of people chase the revenue. So why did you stay focused on the profit as opposed to just chasing revenue?
My first Service World Expo event that I attended, it was in Las Vegas. And at that point, I had a number of good mentors, Kerry Webb, Ben Stark, Steve Miles, and I can't remember which one of them. It's either Ben or Kerry pulled me aside, and they knew, here I was, deer in headlights, first big event. I'm going to see all the things and hear all the things and be drinking from the fire hose. And they pulled me aside and said, "Hey, listen, you're going to hear all sorts of things here. You're going to hear these massive numbers. You're going to hear you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be doing whatever. And really sit back, take it in, and realize what's relevant for you in your situation today. And then when somebody likes to throw out these big revenue numbers, ask them what their net profits are." And he's like, "I guarantee they will not share that with you." And so I think I was grounded early from that. I ended up finding myself in that trip in a cigar bar at Caesar's Palace, and sitting to my left is Ken Goodrich, sitting to my right is Ben Stark, Steve Miles, I think Keith Neff, and
I was at
Were
that
you
cigar bar.
were you in there?
This was the one where it was. I think we were at the hotel that had like the Paris thing out front of it.
No,
Landon,
this was in Caesars.
was it in Caesars?
Yes,
What
sir.
was Landon there too? And Dell still came along sometime later. I think Dell just got his gold Rolex watch for hitting like some ungodly amount of sales. Maybe that was another time in Vegas.
I
There's
think
been
it was
many.
Paris. Paris was another year.
Okay, okay. Well,
Paris was a different year. But yeah, I'm sitting there, like I said, Ken, Ben, Steve, and whoever else in there, and I'm just a fly on the wall, right? I'm just sitting back listening, and I'm trying to think of what these guys are saying and how it's relevant to me in my business. And so I've become very good at listening to these big guys who have had to figure out things to maintain profitability, systems and efficiencies and processes to maintain their profitability. But when you do it at a smaller scale, you grow exponentially on the efficiency side because you don't have 50 techs to oversee, you have five. And so if you work out something, I mean, like out here in my shop, it's not the biggest shop in the world. The back end, I probably have 2,000 square feet. But as soon as I moved in, I went out there and I measured, I think it's 6 by 6 or 7 by 7. And I put tape outlines and I can stage 9 systems. And I made it as a drive through. And I can load two systems at one time. I can have two trucks backed up and load those systems. And so if I'm loading two at a time that are already staged, I can have them in and out in less than 20 minutes. And so I can get all 9 systems out of my shop in about an hour's time. And then I worked out a process to where I didn't stock anything here. I made the supply house stock it for me so I could keep cash flow. And they have them delivered. We already have it marked for which job in each box. And they have it delivered by 3 p.m. the day before. And it's gone that next morning. And so we started figuring out these efficiencies. How can we do this faster? How can we streamline everything as if we were a big company? And we weren't afraid to invest in those things either. And I think that's one thing that's overlooked. Like currently, I'm without a company, right? And you can't see it, but I got tear pads all along this wall over here on what it would take to create another company and all the things I want it to be. You know, it's my big vision boards. I got 6 tear pads up there right now with, what's this going to look like? What's that going to look like? And we're actually building an app as we speak to help with this. And I'm learning Zapier and how to create Zaps. And it's going to automatically populate within my app and notify who needs to be notified at what time in advance, even down to oil changes on the truck to the office, down to the whichever manager. If it's a plumbing manager, 3 months in advance. And Alan, you know about this. I got to get them in continuing ed so their license doesn't lapse. Mm-hmm. And so even their driver's license, 3 months in advance, it notifies themselves and their managers. And then the manager can go and tell the office manager to take this person out for this time and go ahead and schedule for the continuing ed and everything else. And so we're creating these systems and processes to help maximize efficiency.
So, are you under non-compete still, Joe, or are you almost done?
16 more months.
16 more months. Not that you're counting, right?
No, not at all.
That's funny. So, you bring me back, Joe, to 2012 when I sold for the first time. We were about 9 million in revenue then, but we were 21% EBITDA or net profit, whatever you want to. But I still look back on that time. We had 30 employees. I still look back at plumbing only, but I still look back on that time and think that might have been when it was the most fun. Like we had any one of those guys would be happy to send to my house. Like they were really good, really solid, nice technicians that you'd be happy to if they dated your daughter, sort of thing. You know,
Right.
they were really good guys. We had good customer service reps. You know, and as you get bigger, that becomes more and more problematic because you're in a race to hire people. But you're certainly giving me a little bit of deja vu, and you're talking about what you were doing back then. So, Joe, a lot of companies hit big or sorry, I want to ask you first, when you were hitting over 20% net, when did you realize like that wasn't the norm in the industry?
You know, I've thought about that. I didn't know any other way, Alan. I didn't know that I wasn't an anomaly. I really, I just didn't. I mean, I learned a P&L and how to read it early on, and it was just going to business. You know, at the end of each month, I'd look at my P&L and I'd make adjustments. You know, I was always taught 20% direct labor, 30% parts and pieces and equipment, you know, above the line. I include any finance fees, direct, buy down fees, whatever above that. And then below the line, max 30% overhead and 20% profit. And so that's what I was taught. And so that's what I went after. I didn't really know any different.
Right. That makes sense.
So you implemented some disciplines. You just said you were taught some golden rule of thumbs and you went after them. That's good. Um, but my real question to you, I think, is why did you believe it? I mean, Alan, we've seen plenty of people be taught the
Yeah.
right things to do, and something creeps in. Usually, it's a lack of discipline from my experience. So they want some stuff, or they don't want to listen to their coach. They just do some dumb things when the answers are right there in front of them. So why didn't you do some dumb things?
My, I think it's my competitiveness. Um, I always want to be the best at what it is that I do. And my definition of being the best, I guess, is different. You know, most people think the best is being the highest revenue company. And in mine, again, I had all sorts of people and coaches in my ear and, preaching systems, processes. Have you read Michael Gerber's book yet? Have you read Traction? Have you read, Built to Last? Have you read all these things? And I think my that formed my definition of being the best. And I always remember Dad had been in the business for a long time, and he talked about in the early 80s, this one guy, I don't know the name of the company, but this one guy came in and blew up overnight. He did like $2 million in revenue and was bankrupt the next year. And I think the struggles that Tanya and I had early on made me conservative whenever it came to the business because I took on a burden when I started hiring people. It wasn't just me and my family anymore that I was looking out for. It was them and theirs also. And so, I've been blessed because of that. I mean, I've watched people buy their first homes. I've watched people have children. I've watched people have grandchildren. I've got currently five former employees that were running their own businesses. One's a plumber that left about 18 months ago, 24 months ago, and he's up to 4 or 5 trucks already, killing it. And I think the reason why I was so profitable was because of the early struggles, and I knew that I had to have reserves. And in order to have reserves, I had to make a profit. And so we actually got to the point where we keep 9 months of overhead in the bank. And I think that helped us with the profitability too. Staying as conservative as we were.
Makes sense.
I really appreciate that sort of perspective, and I think making a lot of money in revenue is one thing, but keeping a bunch is a whole nother.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So a lot of companies, Joe, hit big revenue but still lose money. Why do you think that happens?
It's Ben Stark told me a long time ago, once you get over 15, 20 million, you have to feed the beast. And you ran a big company, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it doesn't matter what happened last month. If you were profitable or if you weren't, next month's marketing piece is coming, and you have these agreements that are in place, and you budgeted last month to do 5 million and you only did 3. It doesn't matter, and you're still marketing as if you did $5 million, and the bills for a $5 million company are coming in. And I think that's the difference. If I was to build another company and I was to try to grow it, and I mean really grow it, I would do a hub and spoke approach. I mean, you're in Houston. How long did it take your people to drive from one side of Houston to the other?
Oh, it could be an hour to get to a call, Joe. When traffic is bad, easily. Yeah.
Right. Along with the tolls, along with everything else. And so, I started what maybe best description is when I look at something, it's like this container here, right? And I don't look at it from one direction. I look at it all the way around, top, bottom. I try to figure out every single thing I can about it. And so, we took over a company that once we took it over, it was running 2.6 billable hours a day. My old company's running 6 per tech. And so, why is that? Well, everybody tries to grow so big and they spread out so far, and they think they're saving money on renting a 80,000 square foot shop versus 5,000 square foot shops. I mean, once you actually start doing the math on that and you see how you increase billable hours and you increase efficiency, that shop rent is nothing in your compared to your savings. And so I think people get so trapped on the hamster wheel going one direction that it's hard to get off. And you know as well as I do, Alan, once you get that big, it's hard to shift gears. I mean, you have this beast going in this direction. It's one thing if you have 20 techs. If you have 200, it's something completely different.
So, Joe, you're leading me to a question here. What would let's say you started a new company tomorrow, and I know you can't, but when you can, 24, 36 months from now, what is the optimal size of that company in your opinion? And like, what is the end goal?
Each location, $10 million. And where I'm at in DFW, I could probably have 5 or 6 locations in the 5 or 6 counties that are around, and buy something in the central hub of that county and have technicians that are housing that location. I can still have the hub, in the center part of DFW for the installers, because if they're driving one way to go to an 8-hour job, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's running the techs all over the place that becomes the major issue. And so there's certain licensing requirements and things I'll have to, hurdles I have to get over, but that's easy to do. And I think that's what my other company looks like. Just get it to 10 million, open the next branch, open the next branch. And then once I get up to 3, 4 locations, then I can start doing mass media marketing and actually lower my cost. But until then, it'd be more fine-tuned marketing in smaller locations. I mean, when you walk through a $10 million organization, and I'm saying 10 now instead of a 7 because of inflation, you walk through a $10 million organization, you know everybody's name, like you said earlier. It's a different scenario. It's a family friendly, employee centered, customer centered organization versus just who's that guy? Who hired him? I don't even know who that
And
is.
would you have a GM for each location, Joe?
That's possible. I'm starting to wonder if technology can do away with that. More of like a center manager versus a GM. Because of efficiencies in technology today, I think there's some things that can be done away with.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my brain goes to a couple different places in regard to this hub and spoke model. One is if you're aiming for efficiencies and you're not planning to sell again, put it in the hub. That makes a lot of sense. But the other thing that goes through my brain is that with the hub and spoke model, it's almost like you've got the goose that's laying eggs. And if you did build out each center to be independent of each other, you don't have to sell them all collectively. You could potentially sell them individually. And if you had a center that was all independent, if you did roll them up, you sort of have your own built in roll up. But the bottom line is that just boils down, to, I think, to what your goals are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's move over to the real operator segment, Alan.
Yep, absolutely. So, Joe, you said there's no silver bullet. It's systems, sweat, and responsibility. So, Joe has seen owners jump from coach to coach, idea to idea, always looking for a magic answer. But his business was built on execution, not tricks. His competitive edge wasn't a secret. It was consistency, clarity, and accountability. So, Joe, what's the biggest trap you see contractors fall into when they're trying to grow?
Just what you said, and what I was warned about, like I said earlier, going to these events and hearing the newest thing out and the new shiny object, um, especially when they're so small that they end up spending all of their profits on these new things and nothing ever gets done. Um, if I was in business today, I would probably create a new position, and that's going to be a tech manager. And there's so many kids coming out of these colleges now that I would have one on staff. And I would start having them build out systems and processes within the organization that are digital and create such efficiencies that, you know, that you can't help but be profitable. But I think, most people, they don't know what they don't know and they want to get there overnight. They don't want to put in the work. I mean, do you think Todd lifts what he lifts today from lifting for the last year? He's been posting shirtless videos for the last 6 years. We all know what Todd's doing on his days off, and it's not, it's just
You
being
post
there
two shirtless videos, Alan. Two.
I don't know. He seems pretty excited about the shirtless videos, Todd. That's all I know.
but it's just the repetitive, you know, broken wheel doing the same things over and over. I mean, my wife kids with me that if somebody wanted to off me, they would know exactly where I was, whatever day of the week, because I eat the same places, I go to the same places, I do the same things, and I think it's just training yourself to say being repetitive is okay. And you just have to show up every day and do the same things.
I actually want to hit on that if you don't mind. So I got 2 points I want to hit on.
Yeah.
One, when you said tech manager, at first I thought you were going to go down the road of like call by call.
Hmm.
But then I'm like, oh no, you mean actually like an information technology type person.
Correct.
So my first question, and then I'm going to move to routine. My first question to you is, what's got you so dialed in and focused right now on technology? Is it your partnerships that you're in with Billy at Sarah and the guys at AC Smart? So something's got your brain turned on to this right now. What is it?
Is it built to last or good to great? In there, he talks about you have to show up and do all the things, right? But keep an eye on the future. And the early adopters typically get clobbered, but you don't. But well, no, they don't get clobbered. Actually, there's a bell curve, and they make a bunch of money going up the bell curve. But then everybody catches up, and profitability drops off. Well, I see lots of things changing over the next 5, 10 years with the introduction of private equity. Um, I think, well, this is round three. I think, this round's going to go the way that a lot of the other rounds have gone. 50% of the private equities will probably be out. I don't see people getting their companies back for pennies on the dollar this time. I see the bigger fish consolidating the smaller fish. And I see them investing in technology to become more profitable and more efficient. And I think I need to land somewhere in the middle. If I'm going to have an ability to compete with these guys, then I'm going to have to land somewhere in the middle and have some of that. And I probably need to come out of the gate running. Because again, like I said to Alan a while ago, when I have 20 techs, that's one thing. I get to 200 techs, 2,000 techs. The ability to change is not there anymore. It takes years to implement these changes. It's not an overnight boom, let's get it done. But I think technology, my parents are in their early 70s. Actually, dad's now mid 70s. And I'll go over to their house. Like, y'all hungry? Nope. Shh. We just ordered something. It'll be here in 30 minutes. Y'all going to the grocery store? Nope. We ordered it a little while ago. It'll be here in just a little bit. Even they are going online and buying these things. So I think, I remember when a schedule engine first came out and everybody's like, oh no, that's never going to work. My wife, completely against it. Thought it was going to destroy our business. 40% of our calls we never even talked to now. Or we didn't. I think it's actually up to almost to 50. I introduced contractor commerce. Never marketed it. Not one time. Didn't reduce my pricing. I was high. I'm selling systems on contractor commerce without even marketing it. So that's telling me these things are going to be viable in the future. And so how can I take contractor commerce and marry it into schedule engine? And along the way, have it shoot over to the supplier what it is that I need and tell them when I need it and where to put it. And so how can I sell that system online and never touch it?
Yeah, the workflow movements are a lot of fun. Um, the next one isn't really a question; it's a comment. You talk about routine, and Alan and I were talking on the way to lunch about the routines that I'm practicing in my life. And if you guys are following my life, you know that business is important to me, but it's a far cry from family and personal health. Because I sort of look as your spirituality and your family and your personal health as the real wealth, because
Absolutely.
time and relationships is something that you don't get back. Money can
Mhm.
come and go. But to your point about routine, one of the things that I know that is abundantly clear is that, and I tell my kids this all the time, like, you want to develop routines, because if you develop routines, you can put certain things on autopilot, things that you no longer have to think about, that can just happen and they produce a desired outcome. The only problem is when we put bad habits into autopilot.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful about when we're building routines that we've done our pre-mortems, if you will. We've asked, like, does this actually lead to the right outcome? We don't want to be post-morteming all of our routines that have led to bad outcomes. We want to do that in advance. So when you picked up the container, you said, "I'll look around it from all sides." I think this actually does demonstrate and strong example. One of the reasons why I knew I wanted you to have me on the show is that you're implementing things that can leverage profitability. And I mean, let's just be frank here. If you get a $10 million business that's doing 2 million in EBITDA and you're smart investing, how much money do you really need?
Hmm.
You can live an amazing life forever on that. Honestly, if you had 3 years of that and you were smart with your money, you're set up forever.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give it to you, Alan.
So, Joe, if you are running a $2 to $5 million shop right now, what muscle do you have to build that $10 million shop the right way?
I'm going to go back to systems and processes. We all deal with technicians that have those bad habits. We all deal with green technicians. What was it? For every 5 techs we have today that are leaving the field, then only 2 are coming to replace them, or 3. And so, I hear people all the time complaining about these kids, and I was there. I used to do that myself. That we can't find anybody. We want to replicate ourselves out there in the truck. Well, I finally realized one day it wasn't the kid's fault, it was my fault. And the kid was doing what they know to do. And I was at fault for not training them properly. I was at fault for not creating the system and process to make them successful. And I think it was after I read Michael Gerber's book, E-Myth, where he's talking about, oh, my mind just went blank, Sarah, and how she wanted to grow her business, but she couldn't because she was married to the business. She was in the business until she finally had written down systems and processes that were tracked and proven and then tested and measured daily. I think that actually comes from Gino Wickman. Then you're never going to grow. And so one thing that I did was I went through and built levels of repairs because, if you ask me why your capacitor went out in your outdoor unit, well, there's 6 or 7 reasons why your capacitor fails. I know that because I'm in the business now 35 years. But this kid that's a year out of school doesn't necessarily know that, right? And so we sat back, and it wasn't fun and it wasn't fast. I think it took us 3 or 4 months, and we built out correlating repair tasks. And so, come out, you want to do the minimum repair today? We can do your capacitor. But more than likely, your condenser coil's dirty. More than likely, you may have a chattering contactor. You may have high voltage. Fan motor or compressor may be both overamping. And we developed these forms on every single call that we made our service technicians fill out. Every one of them. And then we had their correlating option for the repair. So what I essentially did was created this form for this kid that just came out of school to fill out, to then have the aha moment. And then when he goes into the dispatching software and goes into the price book, he can find the repair that includes that. And so building out those systems and processes is what got us over the hump and had us growing exponentially. That and getting out of my own way.
Mhm. Well, we all have to do that at times, Joe.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what's going through my brain, guys, is that you're counting down the minute. 16 months, 5 days, 2 hours, 32 seconds, and you've got an entire wall behind you filled with potential future systems and procedures. You're thinking hub and spoke. You've got all of these things running through your mind. And I know that you said I didn't need to sell, but I was ready. That was in a previous podcast. I'm not so sure you were actually ready.
No, I was. I mean, I was burned out. This has given me time to really reflect on some things. And if and when I build the next one, it's not going to be for me. It's going to be for my employees. And I just lost an employee here about 3 or 4 months ago who had been by my side for about 30 or 20 years. He was my ops manager, but I have others that I didn't get there by myself. And so, no, he passed away with cancer, and very rare, very aggressive form of leukemia. And you know, as you said earlier, what we got paid, my family and I are good. We're good. But I want to make sure everybody else's family that helped me and my family get to where we are, I want to make sure they're good.
Well, I want to. I want this to be the last section that we talk about because you were doing 2 million a year in EBITDA, but you were burnt out. Many things go through my brain when I hear this, and you sold. The first thing that goes through my mind, because I was getting near that point here not so far back, and I sat and I looked and I was thinking to myself, like, what's burning me out, Alan? And a lot of it was basically because EBITDA was so high because I was still doing a lot of lifting that other people could have been doing.
Hmm.
I decided to go ahead and drop my EBITDA and get a whole bunch of my time back. I'm not burnt out today, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the show here. So I'm asking, and I'm not judging. Why were you burnt out? And could you have resolved that if you would have made an investment and lowered the EBITDA a little bit by doing so?
Absolutely. Well, the reason why we decided to sell, we could have done what you just said, but there were two reasons why we decided to sell. I had a minority partner, and that I've grown up with since ninth grade, and we had a friend that we've known at least that long or longer, and he's in the healthcare space, and he's been partnered with private equity for 8 years now, and he actually handles a lot of their M&A stuff. And we went and spoke to him and asked, why should we do this? And he said, you owe it to yourself and your family to at least have the money truck back up once. Take the chips off the table now and know that you're set. Then you can do it again and help others. And that's what we're doing. And then two, um, I wanted to learn from Harvard Business School graduates how to really run a business and scale it.
What does that mean? Are you
And
taking some classes? Or you mean because you're with private equity people?
because I was with private equity, and I wanted to see how. To be honest, I was terrified of private equity. I thought they were going to take over everything, and then they're trying to. I mean, even down to supply houses and whatever else. And so, take some chips off the table and learn from these guys.
So you're saying you might have part of the reason why you might have considered selling was were you fearful that if you didn't, you might miss an opportunity or they might take over your market space or
Correct. Yeah. No, that they would, eventually just, you know, put us out of business. Slow, painful death.
I
And
appreciate the
so,
honesty to the answer because I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's good to
I
know
do
what you're
too.
thinking.
Yeah.
but I will tell you what I really learned from private equity, and not just me or mine, but talking to my friends that have all done the same. I'm not scared of them. Not anymore. I have nothing to be scared of. So again, they're getting so big, they don't they don't have the efficiencies that I can come out with.
I think they could. I'll tell you what I think it is. I don't think they have the operators.
I was, that's exactly where my mind was going. Like, what private equity doesn't have, they have a bunch of very educated people that are very smart and could run a lot of businesses. What they don't have, Joe, is people like you and me and Todd and others that have been there in the trenches, know how to relate to the blue collar workers, know how to motivate and move people. Um, like, if all the operators just disappeared, they'd be in real trouble. Like,
Mhm.
they couldn't run these businesses without the operators. So I think that would be the missing link, and I think the biggest threat to the private equity owned companies is, are they succession planning successfully? Because there's a bunch of guys my age, I know I'm older than you, Joe, but like my age and even 10 years down from me, that are starting to think about, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And have they prepared the next generation of leadership? Like, I always felt once I sold and I knew I was going to step back someday, my number one job was to get the next guy ready. Like, in my mind was, take care of the people, take care of the customers, get your successor ready. And like, I feel like I've done a really good job of that in the company I ran and owned. But, you know, it's also, I think it's their biggest challenge going forward, Joe, is to have qualified people to run this company.
Absolutely. I have a good friend, Matt Michelle. He's been writing about this a lot lately. And when I said I think 50% of them will be out of business, that's one of the reasons why. I mean, you have the fragmentation that's happening just like the last two times. People are either jumping ship, old techs or whatever, are getting out, they're starting their own. You have the founders that are walking away. And now you have a bunch of well-funded founders that now have seen how to scale at ease and understand the scalability of these companies. And, like you said, they are the guys that turn the wrenches and they understand things that these other people don't. And so I think you're about to see, starting now, a lot of these people come out of the shadows and back into the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all about mindset.
Hmm.
And I think what you just said is really, really poignant. So I want to ask you a slightly different question. If you had the mindset that you have right now, which is one that realizes that private equity actually isn't, that much smarter than you, but to be frank, you were intimidated by them. I think that's a great
Yeah.
asset for them. And again, I'm not anti-private equity. I've done deals with private equity. Private equity has paid me money for being part of exits for companies, and we'll do more of those in the future. But I'm also not going to sit here and give them a blank check on any behavior they want either. But here's my question to you. You have a mindset now. You understand that you can play at their level. If we could have rewound and plugged in today's knowledge and confidence into your brain in 21, 22 when you sold, would you have sold,
Yes.
now? You still would have. Okay.
Yes, because I'm I'm playing from a completely different position.
Joe, as you look back, what did you do to prepare for that clean, profitable exit? Like, obviously, you built systems and procedures, but what else did you do to get ready for the exit, the clean exit?
I worked with an investment banker firm for 18, 24 months in advance. So I actually walked away from a closing, day of closing. And I'm not going to say the name of the organization. They had some issues. I had some issues. The CEO and I met, parted way friends, awesome organization. Still are today, one of the leaders. And once I did that, I said, I tried doing this thing on my own and it didn't work. Um, let me enlist some people. And so, I did like most everybody else. They kind of lean on these folks and talk to them a little bit, just trying to extract information out of them because I don't want to pay them to, handle my deal. Well, it was actually Brian Cohen with SFP, and I called Brian up. I was like, "All right, man, send me over the contract. Let's do this thing." And worked with them for the next 18 to 24 months and got the company in the right place in the right shape and exited 4 times more than I walked away from.
Good
Wow.
job.
Wow, good job, Joe. Yeah, yeah. So, Joe, this is something that a lot of people have asked me for advice over the years on what should they do to get ready for a sale. And I always say, get yourself a broker, because I feel like the people I know that have sold using a broker, I feel like the broker has more than paid for themselves.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that statement?
100%. There's so many games that are being played. I'm not going to say any names, but a buddy of mine did exactly what I was describing me doing early on. And he came back to me and was like, I'm getting a 10x on like $1 million EBITDA company. No, you're not. Like, no, right here it is, 10x. And I realized real fast, and I didn't want to tell him. I mean, he was excited. And I bit my tongue. But they lowered your EBITDA and then gave you 10x. So they really probably gave you what it was worth, but they hooked you with telling you they're giving you 10x, but they lowered your EBITDA whenever they did did the math on your EBITDA. And so, I think that's one other thing. Figure out what it is you need and know that if you give your money to a broker and they invest it after taxes, you're probably going to make 4%. So if you need $200,000 to live, the life that you live today, then say you need 300,000, and then figure out whatever that's 4% of. It's like $8 million, right? So you need to walk with 8 million. Does it matter if you're getting, well, then you have M&A attorneys, the broker, taxes, CPAs. You probably need about 12 to net the 8, right? And so if the 8 is comfortable, what does the multiple matter? Just figure out what it is you need for you and your family to live the rest of your life and never have to worry about anything. And I think, Todd, that's really the reason why is we had our number and they came in over that, about 15-20% over that. And that's why I was like, you can have it.
We were at Louisville when the deal came through, and like you said, you were going back doing paperwork when we were talking earlier. And I still remember you coming around the corner, right? You were coming around the corner, and like you literally had a strut, and you were like, "It's done." And I'm like, "It happened." It's like, "Oh, it happened." Like, yeah, you were on another level of elatement. It was actually
Yes,
pretty
sir.
cool to see that. So that was a good deal. Going back to what you said about the games that are played, there are some good games that are played, and what I would say for anyone that's considering selling their business is don't ever share your financials directly. Don't ever sign a LOI or an NDA. If you don't have a broker, you don't play that game. Because whatever number you give them in the beginning is going to be the number that they are going to use to, get a number of a multiple to you. And chances are you probably don't have all of your ad backs and everything else in there. It's going to cost you a lot of money. So yeah, just don't do those things. Alan, we have clients all the time going, "Hey, someone's offering me. They just want me to sign this NDA that says I won't talk about anything, but then I can tell them my numbers." I'm like, for the love of God, how many millions of dollars do you want to give away? Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that. No, that's
Yeah.
dumb, 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 dumb.
Well, and they're tying you up for 6 months. That's in there. People don't realize that. You just went off the market for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a bad, bad move. Bad move.
Absolutely. So, Joe, what you built wasn't just lean, it was legendary in a world that celebrates chaos. You proved that discipline wins. So, congratulations on that. Thanks for pulling back the curtain on how you did it.
Yeah, for sure. We appreciate your vulnerability. We appreciate your honest approach to this. And I think if someone is a founder today and they've got that $100 million mindset and they're sitting in Hattiesburg, Mississippi going, I got a $100 million mindset. I don't have a $100 million business. You do have a $12.5 million business. You do have a business that can be 20% profitable. And Joe has given you a lot of examples on how to do that. And so for that, Joe, we want to say thank you. And we appreciate you contributing here to this community.
Thank you for having me.
It was great to meet you, Joe. I really enjoyed
too.
it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the show this week. Head over to toddliles.com/mindset to get the show notes. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a new episode of the show. And if you enjoyed this episode, then share it. It really helps us get the word out. You've been watching the $100 Million Mindset with Alan O'Neill and Twiddlywinks Todd Liles.